American health is what, probably some of the worst in the world. Would
It's
you
pretty
say that?
bad. There are metrics that rank our health, and I think that we spend the most, if not top three in the world on healthcare. I think in 2024 or 2023, it was 4.3 trillion was the number that we spent on healthcare. But our healthcare outcomes, I think we're like 65th or something in the world, give or take. So there's a huge discordance.
I mean, more than 70% of Americans are overweight or obese, and over 11% have diabetes. It's a crisis that's just spiraling
And I would say
out of
the
control.
diabetes number is much higher than that, even, I would
You
say.
think so?
Yeah, that's formally diagnosed diabetes, but there are other studies that have been done looking at this continuum. And this is what Western medicine really misses when we're talking to patients and when we are taught as doctors to think about this. Diabetes is a continuum. And the reason this is so important to talk about is because metabolic dysfunction, also known as insulin resistance, is that continuum. And that pathology underlies, I would say, 90+% of chronic illness. And this is not hyperbole. The majority of chronic illness that we suffer from as Americans today is based in insulin resistance, also known as metabolic dysfunction. And 90% of our healthcare costs are related to chronic illness, something that is preventable and reversible with the quality of our diet and how we live. This is what the Hadza don't have. This is what Native Americans did not have historically. So I'll tell you this story. This is pretty interesting. I went to medical school in Tucson, Arizona, at the University of Arizona. The Pima Indians are around Tucson, Arizona. So I went and visited Pima Indian reservations when I was in medical school. The Pima Indians are some of the sickest people in the world today. The rates of obesity and diabetes are over 80 to 90%. 80 to 90%.
Wow.
Like what? Okay. And so 200 years ago, rates of obesity and diabetes were less than 1% in the Pima Indian tribe. This tribe of Native Americans has genetics that are uniquely susceptible to the environment that they find themselves in now. Ultra-processed foods, we can talk about certain things. But 200 years ago, there are pictures online of Pima Indians from 1860, right? They're fit. They have six-pack. They look like they're healthy humans. But they have a uniquely susceptible genetic makeup to becoming insulin resistant. And so what happened when the Pima Indians had this explosion of chronic illness, after we gave them supermarkets full of Cheetos and Fritos and Takis and alcohol, is the NIH sent researchers to draw their blood to see what kind of genetics they have that make them susceptible to this chronic illness. We never thought, maybe we just poisoned them, right?
Yeah.
The cause of their illness is black and white. It's absolutely black and white. And yet not once in medical school did this come up. Never once was I taught to think about this or challenged to think about this from a professor saying, what do you think about the Pima Indians? How do we help them? Like, the way to help the Pima Indians is to educate them, maybe provide subsidies or something for them to buy single ingredient foods. But I would be willing to bet a large amount of money that if you gave the Pima Indians the foods that they ate 200 years ago, they would become healthier. And we've seen this. There have been research studies done on this. It's done with Aborigines. I forget exactly what lineage it was in Australia. The same thing happens with these indigenous people all over the world. When they eat westernized foods, which are full of seed oils, refined grains, processed sugars, pesticides, food dyes, they become ill. And the same thing is happening to westernized humans. And so when you look at this continuum of insulin resistance, multiple studies estimate that as Americans, 86 to 93% of us, 86 to 93, have at least one metric that puts us on that continuum. So diabetes is the end stage. But I would say more than 85% of Americans are on the road to diabetes. And this is the problem. And again, my assertion here very strongly would be, it's not hard to get off that train, right? It's what we eat and how we live. Majority of it is what we eat and how we live. Very, very rarely there's a genetic mutation, polymorphism that is unavoidable. This is less than 1% of humans. Most of us are very sick, and we're sick because of how we're living and eating, and because these foods are sold to us now. And then when you go to see a doctor, I was never taught to ask people about what they're eating in medical school. I was never given a single nutrition course. I was taught what drugs to prescribe for what illness. That was what's on my boards, right? So the step 1, the step 2, the step 3, this is what determines a doctor's success in life. It means what specialty you can go into, what residency, how prestigious you can go, how far you can go in medicine are your boards. There's not a single question on the board exam. I mean, I think every board exam is, I forget how many questions. It might be 1,500 questions, thousands of questions that I answered over the course of my medical career to become a licensed medical doctor. I don't remember a single question about nutrition because we were never taught that. It's not what we're held up to think about.
It's pretty alarming.
Yeah. So that's just the crazy standard that we find ourselves in. But it's important to understand that, like diabetes, maybe formally diagnosed 11%, the number of people going to become diabetic, much, much higher. Because if 70% of Americans are obese and overweight, and those are two different categories of BMI, body mass index, I would argue that almost everyone, if not every single person who is obese or overweight, has some degree of insulin resistance. And this is metabolic dysfunction. And at a cellular level, this means that you can't take the food you eat and convert it into usable energy in your human body. That happens through your mitochondria. So mitochondria are these little cellular organelles that are in almost every cell of our body. Red blood cells don't have mitochondria, but everything else has mitochondria. And so this is where the energy gets made for everything we do in our life. Human life runs because of the movement of electrons. And the food that we're eating is electrons, essentially. And those electrons are passed onto intermediates, which move the electrons into the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. So that's very, very microscopic. And this is, when you eat, let's say you eat an apple or you eat a steak, that steak is giving you nutrients, it's giving you vitamins and minerals. You're getting protein, you're getting amino acids. And in a steak, you're getting mostly protein, which doesn't end up as an energy substrate, but there's fat in the steak. So fat is broken down to create these energy substrates. And if you eat an apple, you're getting glucose and fructose and sucrose. If you eat a potato, you're getting long chain polymers of glucose, like starches. And that is energy to your body. And the way that happens is that gets broken down into little smaller fragments, and those fragments donate electrons to molecules like NADH and FADH2, which move those electrons to this electron transport chain. And that electron transport chain in your mitochondria is where everything happens. Because as the electrons move down the chain, you create a potential. And hydrogen, so protons move across the inner mitochondrial membrane. I know we're very microscopic now. I'll zoom out in a second. Protons move across the inner mitochondrial membrane. And then at the end of the mitochondrial membrane, they move down a concentration gradient through this little nano motor that makes ATP. And ATP runs everything in your body. That's the energy currency of your body. That is the sort of dollars and cents of your body that your body spends on creating hormones, proteins, cellular membrane, repairing things, making DNA. You need energy to live. But that process of energy creation is impaired by the foods we eat. And that is what insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction look like at a molecular level. So the engine of our car is being broken by the fuel we're putting in it.
Man, it sounds like just a little education could reverse this entire epidemic.
It would go a long way, and we probably need bottom up and top down. And top down, I mean, maybe governmental regulation of things that are frankly poisonous for humans. And the bottom up is mostly what I do now. Maybe I'll get to be involved in the MAHA movement and help RFK with some of this MAHA stuff, but we'll see. But the education helps people wake up. There's a really sad thing I'll tell you, that there are these places, I mentioned this earlier, there are these places in the United States called food deserts where it's difficult for people to actually access single ingredient foods, or they have to go a certain number of miles to get to an actual grocery store. Mm-hmm. And there are grocery stores. These are very rural, poor communities. If you're driving across the country, you're going to encounter these. And there are grocery stores, there are places in the States where it's difficult to find, actual meat or fruits and vegetables. But most of the food deserts are food deserts by choice, which is really sad, that people in these communities haven't been educated, don't understand, and have really been, I would say, addicted to processed food, which is very addictive. And grocery stores or corner markets in these places in the past may have carried fruit and vegetables, but nobody bought them, and they rot on the shelf. And so They become a food desert by consumer choice. So that's scary. And that actually is a testament a very sinister testament to how addictive some of these ultra processed foods are. That if you provide a choice in some of the poorest communities in America between a Snickers bar and Doritos, and let's say an apple or a banana or an orange, most people are going to choose the Snickers bar and the Doritos, and that is a problem. So what do we do there? That's a good question. And I'll mention this because it's relevant. So in these poorest communities, SNAP, which is food stamps, so Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is used significantly. So at a governmental level, I think we could help things by not allowing food stamps to be able to be used to buy junk food. So I think it's the food stamp budget, I think, is $112 or $15 billion a year that goes out to people. 70+% of that gets used by people on junk food. That's the problem, right? That, I think, fixes a big part of this. If you disallow the use of food stamps for junk food, you make a big step in the right direction. Now, the argument on the other side is that is classist, racist, or elitist because these people don't have access to foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason they don't have access is because they've made choices because they don't want those foods. So it's some combination, I think, of governmental programming change and actual education of people in these communities, potentially bringing them the good foods. The other thing I'll say about food stamps, which is crazy, is that 10% of those food stamps gets used on soda. You cannot make an argument to me that Coca-Cola and other sodas have any redeeming quality in human health.
Yeah.
And 10% of food stamps go toward that. So at a governmental level, a top-down level.
Surprised not more than
right? So I think education could help, and I think that there's a lot of double standards. And of course, the reason for that is because Coca-Cola lobbies, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I love what you're saying about, that maybe the government should step in and only allow. But I mean, how are you going to get past the lobbyists that are paying politicians and news organizations to market the that's racist? That's, you know what I mean? I mean, because that's what that all stems from, correct? Is the lobbyists. And so to me, it seems like the only real explanation is to educate everybody on, hey, I mean, the marketing, I mean, I just watched a documentary, about half of it the other day. Amazon was a big part of it. Apple was a big part of it. How the pollution is kind of, it was talking about everything. It was talking about how the iPhones are, designed to only last for a certain amount of time. And then you get the new one and it shows how they dispose of the iPhones and the computers and how Amazon does their marketing and how it all goes into landfills, back into the ecosystem, back into our food, what we're breathing. And so, I mean, even the marketing gets tricky. So it can't even just be an education on nutrition. It's how these companies are marketing, which will constantly evolve. So you have to re-educate over and over again. And I mean, you just said it yourself with the pasture-raised beef versus grass-fed. I mean, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? And I get to interview people like you all the time. Yeah. And so for somebody, even just a single mom out there that's just working her butt off trying to make ends meet so that she can feed her kids, I mean, she doesn't have time to listen to this. And so, I mean, I would think that just my personal opinion and with how corrupt I know our government is, I mean, it seems like the only way to do it is to educate the people, and you won't even be able to educate them through a government program because the lobbyists will take the fucking program out of the educational system.
I think that the programming of Americans is a really important thing to talk about. So we can talk about pharma because the U.S. and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical ads on TV. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, we're talking about very disruptive ideas here. If any of these got into practice, if we stopped allowing pharma ads on television, which I think we should, and hopefully this administration will consider, and I know Bobby is for this, and hopefully he gets confirmed like today or tomorrow, on Monday or something. But that would that would single-handedly change the landscape because so many media companies would collapse. The budget for CNN would be reduced. I mean, remember during Pfizer, that's what we call COVID now, was Pfizer.
Yeah.
Remember during COVID, during COVID, which we're renaming Pfizer, there was this sort of meme or this video people made of all the different shows on CNN that were sponsored by Pfizer, whether it was Anderson Cooper, et cetera. So you think about the budget for so many media news outlets and how much of that comes from pharmaceuticals. So disallowing pharmaceutical ads on television would change the media landscape. And I wouldn't miss any of it. Like, I think legacy media is horrible, and I think that they're just brainwashing people. But what about, and this is just a suggestion, what about not allowing junk food to be advertised on television? How many ads are there for Frosted Flakes and Skittles? Like, why are we this food is not good for our children. It's not good for us. Why are we allowing Nabisco to advertise for Oreos on television? Like, and again, I think that I can hear people responding saying, it's free speech. Like, I'm all for capitalism. I'm not trying to, return to a communist state or socialism, but I'm just thinking out loud. Is the marketing that we're seeing on television programming kids at a young age? Is it programming adults? I don't know where you draw the line, right? Does Domino's Pizza get to advertise on television? When I was growing up, there was Little Caesars and Papa John's. None of these foods, I can make a strong case that none of these foods are good for humans. And we can go down the list. But I think that there has been a concerted effort by these multinational processed food companies to shift blame away from them. And so Coca-Cola, this is really interesting. Coca-Cola has done some pretty sinister things. And this is just what I know about Coke. I'm sure the other soda companies have done the same things. But Coca-Cola has funded hundreds of research studies. Coca-Cola has given millions of dollars, I think it might be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, to universities to do research over the years. And what kind of research do? They do research on why junk food is not bad for you as long as you stay in energy balance. And I think this idea of calories and energy balance is one of the most misleading concepts for Americans in our nutrition space. Coca-Cola actually funded something called the Global Energy Balance Network. And the whole idea here is you can eat junk food as long as you exercise. You can out-exercise a bad diet, Sean. To me, this is completely false because there are so many components in the junk food that impair mitochondrial energy production. The simple fact of the matter, and I would love to debate anyone about this, and hopefully more of these will happen in a way that people can actually understand when we're doing the debates, but all calories are not created equally. Weight loss does happen if you're in a caloric deficit. This is thermodynamics, right? Yes, you can lose weight eating 1,500 calories of donuts per day. You will not be healthy, and I guarantee you will be very hungry. And when you stop keeping yourself in a calorie-restricted prison, you will overeat and you will binge and you will gain that weight back because you have impaired your mitochondrial electron transport chain because of the poisonous, I would say toxic additives in these foods. So this is a crazy debate that happens on X and these forums. People will advocate all foods fit, Sean. That is the rallying cry of dietitians all over the world. All foods fit. Just don't eat too much. This is why things like Weight Watchers were created. And you see those little snack packs of Oreos and it says 150 calories. And it's okay to eat junk food as long as you don't exceed your caloric threshold. What we're not being told is that additives, ingredients in these ultra-processed foods impair our ability to make energy from them. They're poisonous to our metabolism. They're poisonous to the very things that give us life as humans. We are sort of an anti-entropic process. Entropy is one of these laws of thermodynamics that all things in the universe tend toward disorder. But this is not disorder. There are incredibly complex cellular processes happening in you and I as we sit across this room. We are breaking entropy, and physicists will say that because we're producing heat, the overall amount of entropy in the system is still going up. But you and I are bounded. We are membrane-bound organisms that are fighting against entropy. And the way that we fight against disorganization is with ATP. When a human dies, the body decays. What's different? We may say the soul, but also cellular energy production is not happening in a human that's dead. right? And that person is buried or cremated or something. But a dead animal is the same thing. The animal starts rotting. If we do not make energy in our cells, we begin decaying in the same way. We begin dying. We need this energy. And that is what this is all about, metabolic health, the ability of your mitochondria to make energy. And so many of the ingredients in these processed foods, whether it's dyes or things that disrupt our gut microbiome or seed oils, directly impair energy production in the mitochondria. And so saying to someone, the Coca-Cola's global energy balance network says, it's okay to drink Coca-Cola, just make sure you get a walk in. That's sinister. That's nefarious. That's how these companies are working against us and brainwashing us and our children into thinking all foods fit. It's okay to feed your children Oreos. Just make sure they get some green beans on the side. But what we're not being honest about is how the ingredients in the Oreos, the ingredients in the Doritos, the Takis, whatever, are actually poisonous for humans. And the quality of the calories in impairs your ability to do calories out. So that's the equation that people will come back to online. Calories in, calories out. Yes, it works thermodynamically, but the quality of the food we eat affects how much energy we can make on the back end. And that's where we've really gone wrong, because believe me, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Kraft, Nestle, Nabisco, ConAgra, they do not want you to eat quality food. They want you to eat their ultra-processed food, which is cheaper, has a better shelf life, and has more of a profit margin for them. They don't want you to eat a banana. They don't even want you to eat oatmeal. They want you to eat an oatmeal cookie or a banana-flavored gummy bear, right? Or something like this. Or they don't want you to eat meat. They want you to eat a plant-based alternative. Or they want you to eat an ultra-processed, meat thing at a restaurant or something. So this is the problem, is that the quality of food is paramount. And we've really, really been misled. And I think it's a concerted effort. I think it's an intentional misleading of humans to confuse us. And that's really bad. But I think that the way forward is very simple. Returning to high quality food, and we can drill down on what I think is best for humans. We've talked a little bit about the spectrum of meats already. Returning to high quality food solves these problems. And this is what I wasn't taught in medical school, but it's why I do what I do today, because I have seen and met and talked to online now thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who have had their chronic illnesses reversed by changing the quality of the foods they eat. Diseases that I was taught in medical school were incurable.
Name a couple of the chronic illnesses you've seen reversed.
Diabetes, obesity, depression, suicidality. I personally had eczema that I reversed by changing my diet.
What's eczema?
Eczema is a skin condition with like itchy, bumpy skin. Psoriasis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis. So I've met people who said their doctor wanted to surgically remove their colon. In ulcerative colitis, we often physically scar people for life. We remove the colon. Some people who have ulcerative colitis end up with a colostomy bag, which is how medicine treats this. And if they need it, they need it. But that's very difficult for someone to live their life. Imagine dating, or living your life with a colostomy bag.
Man.
Right? But I've met people who said, my doctor wanted to operate on my colon and I changed my diet. They did a carnivore diet or an animal-based diet, which is basically meat plus fruit. And they no longer need a colectomy or a colostomy bag.
What timeline are we talking about? You've seen these reversals happen, or is this years?
It happens in weeks to months.
Weeks to months.
Weeks to months, depending on the condition. Yeah, weeks to months.
Wow.
It doesn't even take that long. The human body is very malleable, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not, you skip one meal, right? But it happens within weeks to months. Some people it takes a year or so, but some of the most striking ones are the psychiatric illnesses, bipolar, suicidality, psychosis, depression, because those affect so much else in people's lives.
Yeah.
Infertility. I mean, this is one of the most, endearing things is when a couple wants to have a child and they try everything and then they just change their diet, maybe adding in some organs, and suddenly they can have babies. Wow. That's amazing.
Wow.
Healthy babies too.
Wow.
And I mean, the list goes on. It's almost, if you can name a medical condition, I can find you a case study of someone that I've met or talked to that has almost certainly reversed it with their diet. Now, I want to be clear to clarify this. It doesn't work in everyone 100%, right? But what I've seen, I think, is nothing short of miraculous. And everyone is complex. Sometimes people have other things going on in their life that are beyond food. They have traumatic things, they have trauma in their past, they live in a very toxic environment. Sometimes if someone is living in a moldy building, right, and they have brain fog, they're going to need to do more than change their diet. So I'm not saying that changing your diet cures every one of everything 100%, but what bigger lever? And I was never taught about this in medical school. And so it's cool to get to do this work and to see these people. And living in Costa Rica, one of the downsides is I don't meet people in person. When I see a comment on a thread or something I've done online that said, hey, this really helped me, I think that's great. But having the person walk up to me every single time, I smile. And, I think like, tell me your story. What happened? And that keeps me doing what I do, because that means so much to me. And there's so many stories of people. And sometimes, it doesn't, I don't think that a carnivore or an animal-based diet are the only ways to do that. I think broadly, improving food quality is the first step. And some people with autoimmune disease need to really clarify and intentionally choose foods, and they have to go carnivore or animal-based. Not everyone needs to go that far, but not falling prey to the calories marketing, to the you can drink Coca-Cola, just go on the exercise bike 15 more minutes marketing, and improving food quality. That is an act of rebellion that is so powerful for humans. It's so cool. And so that's really, as I come back to this in what I do, that's what I really feel most excited about sharing with people. I was recently at a conference in Phoenix and I gave a talk, and I think there were probably 10,000 people in the audience. Trump spoke there. It was really cool to see him in person. And I just want people to know that whatever you're suffering from, any of the chronic illnesses we listed, like it's almost certainly able to be massively improved, if not completely reversed, by changing what you eat, and your doctor won't tell you that.